Hey, everybody. This is Jeff, the host of The Garden of Doom. This is not really an episode of The Garden of Doom per se. I guess it'll come in your feed as one. This is just me giving you an update on the show and some things that are going to be happening and some changes and stuff that I hope is good. One, thank you all for enjoying the show. As I always ask, please, if you have an opportunity, give it a 5-star rating. Write a review. Apple and Spotify, I believe, are two of the forms that allow you to do both. But most importantly, refer to your friends or connects that you think would enjoy this type of content. And I know this type of content is extraordinarily broad, which is sort of by design, sort of by accident, because I think that there's something for everybody in this content. And between Garden of Doom and Garden Views, there's a veritable encyclopedia on pretty much everything and anything. Which brings me to what is the purpose of this little snaz? One, I'm looking for feedback from listeners. I don't get a lot of feedback, but the feedback I get is almost 100% positive, which is terrific. And if that's how you all feel, that's awesome. Because I get things like, Garden of Doom is my favorite podcast. Garden of Doom is great. Another great show. Thanks for the content. Stuff like, I promise you, I'm not kidding. Now, I'm not telling you that I get like 10 or 20 of those a day. I wish. I don't even think I get 10 or 20 a week. A month. But I might get half a dozen or 10 of those per month, and that's, believe me, I appreciate every single one of them. But it's usually like people that I interact with on X. I still want to say Twitter. I don't go into the Garden of Doom Facebook page as much as I should. I populate it. I do try to populate it every day, if not 5 out of 7 days a week, with at least one or more articles that I think fit very well within the Garden universe, and if you're enjoying the Garden content. So check it out. Garden of Doom has a Facebook page. And if there are comments for me, I will interact, but that's probably not the best place. The best places are probably on X. And you can find probably at Icarus Fell MD is the best place, although there is an Evil Dose at Garden of Doom X account too. And you're welcome to follow me there too, but I promise you that account is 95 to 99% pro wrestling, which you all know is my weakness, or strength, however you look at it. All right, what am I here to talk to you about and wasting your time on? You may have noticed that there have been less Garden views. That's partially by design. Frankly, I felt I got a little bit giddy when the show listenership quadrupled. And it seemed to me that was at least impacted by having 2 shows a week instead of 1. So I sort of over expanded what were not normally my interests, but I thought might be interesting to you all. And I got a little bit over aggressive in putting out content. Now, nobody's complained to me about the shows. I think I've had nice conversations with all of those guests, and for better or for worse, I seem to be able to find some type of rapport with just about anyone, or the content is interesting enough that I don't need it. It just sort of flows. But I sort of went astray of what Garden Views was, and I do intend for Garden Views to retreat back into things I'm truly interested in. Again, legal issues. We're going to still continue to explore law of the space and the areas of different parts of the world and different countries and their space policies. And I have recordings scheduled. I mean, one gentleman has, we've had to reschedule 2 or 3 times. I'm recording later this month with someone to talk about the Latin American countries, basically south of Texas, but north of the Tierra del Fuego, that zone's interest in space law and their policies. I'm actually on a call next week with a group of African attorneys and policymakers and regulators. I'm not really exactly sure the entirety of the population of the call, but that's what the topic is going to be. I know nothing about it. I'm very interested in that, and through that, I'm sure I will ultimately turn some of that into guests or at least material for that. And of course, my continued work with the Space Court Foundation continues to give me access to attorneys and policymakers and industry members, going into the future in space law. I've also recently joined the American Space Law Society as an advisory member. So that too is going to expand my world of contacts. Now I'm there to help them as an advisory member, but obviously some of those folks are going to be space lawyers and mostly American based, but still it will expand my 6 degrees of separation. And in tech and things like that, I want to stick more to the tech and science and geopolitics. Recently reconnected with Professor DeGennaro, and we're working on getting a date back on the book. She's had some long-term assignments, so that our plan of doing her show every 2 or 3 months sort of fell by the wayside, but maybe we'll be able to pick that up again. But she will be back on again, etc. But I'm going to draw back. However, because I am a booking monster, there's probably going to be a lot of weeks where there's 2 shows a week, but we're probably going to double up on Garden of Doom, which I hope most of you think is good news, because Garden of Doom gets probably 30 to 40% more viewers, listeners rather, than Garden Views, which is natural. Garden Views is a much more niche show generally. Not all of the episodes, but generally some of it. And there's been a lot of overlap. And there's some people I've scheduled that I'm not really sure whether the show is going to be on Garden of Doom or Garden Views, and that happens pretty often. That's not unusual. And there's some more of those coming, as sort of the Venn diagram of science and doom sort of intersect even more and more, or get accelerated. The singularity, if you will. I have some inquiries into some pretty exciting people, but I always say that, and I always mean it. I just keep on trying to raise the bar a little bit with that, and hopefully some of those folks will say yes. But a couple of people who had committed in the past who sort of disappeared have come back. Some people who have committed now have disappeared, but that's par for the course in podcasting. And some of them will reemerge, and some of them probably just forgot, and others. Obviously, I was extremely saddened by the death of Reverend Jim Willis. That hit me hard, I got to tell you. I mean, as far as deaths are concerned, they're not like direct family members or particularly close friends. I've had a few of those. A former business partner. I guess the year David Bowie, Prince, and Tom Petty all passed away, those 3 hit me pretty hard. Bray Wyatt hit me really hard. But Jim Willis hit me like as hard as Bray Wyatt. And that's, like as you live, that's going to continue to happen. But I don't think his shoes can be filled, but sort of scrambled to sort of get what his planned role was in the show before he sort of got sick and was not able to do podcast day longer, before he admitted it was probably a permanent situation, and then before he passed. So I wasn't always working on a replacement for that content. I was, just waiting for his situation to pass or whatnot. But I think I've gotten there. I think I've, or at least on the right path, and that path will usually beget other paths or other guests. So I'm pretty excited about those things. Now, those of you who have been with me for a while may remember way back when, and I'm embarrassed to tell you to go listen to it again. But episode 52 was with my friend PJ Black, who's a professional wrestler. Some of you who might be lapsed wrestling fans but only watch WWE, you might remember him as being in the Nexus and the Core under the name Justin Gabriel. But he's wrestled as PJ Black for like the last 10 years. Ring of Honor, a lot of California promotions, other things as well. Anyway, episode 52 was a really great show with really bad audio quality, and that's all on me. The audio quality, I think you'll all agree, has mostly gotten better. And sometimes when it's worse, it's because the other person's mic isn't so loud or whatever the case is, and I'm still a little bit shy in telling someone, "Hey, your sound stinks," and or assuming that we can fix it on the back end. And sometimes we can, other times we can't. But anyway, it's still worth a listen. The point is that I call PJ my friend because we have kept in touch throughout the years, and it turns out that he actually, for the next year, is not going to be wrestling. And he has a lot of friends in the industry. And just like PJ is a wrestler who has a lot of various interests and learnings and studies and expertise and hobbies, a lot of wrestlers do. They're creative. So we are working on a concept where we're going to talk to other wrestlers about nothing to do with wrestling except how maybe it influences their gimmick or their character or whatnot. But so hopefully we'll get some pretty creative people, and hopefully some of them will be names that you recognize, or at least you recognize some of their stage names, their on-screen names, their in-ring names from the past, present, and maybe some that are going to get there in the future. But more importantly, we're looking for content. This is still an if, not a when, but it's feeling pretty warm. When I was talking to PJ about my concept, he's like, "Hey, I'm not doing anything for a year, so that sounds fun. Maybe that'll give me something to do." And I have to be honest, and I told him this, I was going to ask him, but I was sort of hoping he would offer on his own, but I had no real expectation he would, but he did. So, it's not like I dragged someone into this. So this could be fun. And, I don't want to name any names or spoil anything. At least half the time I do that, it turns out not to happen. So this is not necessarily going to happen, but I feel pretty good that it will. How regular will it be? I don't know. But will that be a third show per week? It might be. But for now, we've decided to keep it under the Garden. We've decided to keep the if under the Garden of Doom heading for the when. Whether that will end up just being a second show a week instead of other Garden of Dooms or Garden Views, I don't know, because I've booked a lot of more Garden of Doom content for recordings midweek than Garden Views content. And while I like to have extra shows in case of emergencies or whatnot, I mean, more than 3 or 4 weeks is an overload. So I think there's a pretty good chance that you're going to start to see 2 shows a week much more frequently going forward. And there's a possibility of 3 times a week. And hopefully you really enjoy, and will enjoy talking to these other wrestlers or creatives. And it may not be limited to wrestlers. We may venture into other areas of other creative endeavors. It's just, it's an obvious connection with PJ and his wrestling ties. And it's a way for me to sort of combine my interests. So that's the news. It's just a status report. So this is not much of an episode of Garden of Doom, but it's letting you know what I'm working on. And, I've got a ton of books to read, a ton of books to listen to. Some I actually have to read because they only have the hard copies, and I do. I try to read the books that people send me. And most of them are pretty good. So I don't really mind it. It's just effort and time. So anyway, that's the status. Wanted to let you all know that. But really, the other note I wanted to get out to the world is that I do really invite your feedback. And again, the easiest way to do it is probably at Icarus Fell MD. My DMs are always open as far as I know. But if they're not and you just tag me, I will respond to you. If we need to follow each other for a DM, I will follow you back. I'm not snooty that way, especially if it's about Garden of Doom. But unless you're like a crypto bro or like a porn bot or your account was created yesterday or whatever, unless it looks like it's like a sales hustle, I'm not someone who's trying to get more followers than I'm following. I don't really care about that. And my accounts, I don't have so many followers that I even have a status. I don't pay for certified. I don't try to monetize X. I don't try to monetize Garden of Doom. I don't take Patreons. I don't do super chats. I don't take donations. I don't have merch. Maybe one day, but probably not. So yeah, you can DM me there. And if there's things that you want to hear about, or there's leads of people that you think would be interesting for me to talk to, that would be great. I've sort of hit a lot of the topics that I intended to and went a lot deeper in a lot of them than I ever intended to. And there's still a bunch on my list that I haven't gone to. But I can feel like my list getting near an end. Like my Yellow Brick Road, I sort of see the Emerald City. Although I do add things from time to time as I learn of their existence or learn of a particular sect or a denomination or a different twist or a different interpretation, whatever the case might be. But, you know, this is a good, it's pretty rare when a host asks you for, you know, your solicitations as to, you know, what you might want to hear from, or even things like, so I don't know, you have a friend that's in, you know, a rock band who, you know, is a Satanist. Awesome. Love to talk to them. You know, doesn't have to be that, obviously. That's just an example I came to. You have a friend who's a classical musician who, you know, is an expert on the Austro-Hungarian Empire. You know, wants to talk about the Habsburgs or, you know, what have you. I mean, that sounds like it could be interesting too. Anyway, you know, one of the original theses of this show was that everybody has their story. Everybody has something that's interesting. And if you know of people that do, or maybe even you're that person, you know, let's at least consider it. And because, you know, I've got to do some audience service and some fan service as well, right? You know, I think it's great that you just trust me to take you along on the journey and with the booking. And of course, I'm going to continue to do that. But, you know, feedback is cool. And if the only feedback is your show's awesome, I love Garden of Doom, this is my favorite show, then thanks. That's awesome. I welcome that. I find it hard to believe that there's no criticism. But if that is your feedback, then all I would ask you is, instead of telling 6 people, tell 100 people. Tell everyone you know. Scream it to the mountaintops, because nothing gives me more energy than positive affirmation and validation. I am an attention whore. That includes, you know, seeing my listens go up by 20%, 50%, 100%, whatever it is. You know, it doesn't take a lot to make me happy, which, you know, gives me more energy and helps me to redouble my efforts and try to think of other projects which may fit into this universe and be fun for you all, something that's a little bit different and unique. One self-criticism. I hear myself repeating myself a lot of time, and I always sort of argue with myself, as I'm doing right now out loud, that I listen to a lot of podcasts and I hear people repeat themselves all the time. I mean, great, terrific podcasters who's been in this business before it was even podcasting, and being on TV or radio or whatever, 10, 20 years, and they repeat themselves all the time. The other part is that while you might be hearing me say sort of the same words or the same thoughts, on a routine basis, my guest hasn't. And it's part of the conversation to further that, and for them to let them know what some of my thoughts are, my theories, or that, I know things that maybe they'd be surprised I know, or whatever, to benefit the conversation. But if you feel like I'm repeating the same things too many times needlessly, I want to know that too, because, for a while I knew I was saying the word whatnot too much. And then I ended up starting saying something like that, which is worse. It just became a substitute for whatnot, but it's worse than whatnot, which was a substitute for etc. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, if you find me repeating the same thing, maybe, I will try to focus on not repeating it, period, or at least finding a different way to express it, or like a different analogy. A different analogy or metaphor, so that at least while the substance may be the same, at least the content that's going into your ears will be different. Or if you think I'm overthinking things, which I've been plenty guilty of in my life, then say that too. But anyway, thank you for continued support. I didn't want this to be any more than 20 minutes, and I'm getting very close to that now. But look for, some new stuff or some variations on the old stuff, but hopefully it's all good. And can't wait to hear from you. Stay able, my friends.